In this debate, Team Joshi Park stands by the principle of the criminal justice, where we need to prove the direct intent to harm and direct intent to touch when you want to constitute the cases of the battery or the assaults in the criminal cases. We're going to prove simple things. First of all, it is really nearly impossible for you to actually prove the intent to harm in these specific cases of defamation. And second of all, we're going to also prove to you why intent to touch specifically is going to be so hard to prove in these specific cases. And we're going to also prove to you why, if there is no generally applicable standard which is proper and objective to apply those cases, it's going to be untrusted. It's going to be unacceptable for the people who are being accused of. Our model is quite simple. We think civil court and the criminal court has different standards, so we're going to apply this motion to only criminal cases because they have different standards. But so the burden of the proof of the opening government is to prove to you why in the criminal court cases we think it's evil. We think it's impossible to have these defamation cases in the criminal courts. If they ask us, do we have any opinion upon the civil courts, we say it's quite a bad idea to do so. Moving on to our arguments, direct causality. We were talking about the intent to harm, right? In criminal cases, if you want to constitute cases, two things, intent to harm, intent to touch. But we're talking about the direct motives and direct action, direct motive to move yourself upon the idea of acting yourself upon the idea, catching the opportunity to directly damage somebody, right? We think we're talking about the famous people, like prestigious people. We're talking about the public beings in this society because those are the ones who are normally getting these accusations, getting these accusations and to actually do sue in the criminal courts. Well, I think people actually talk about them, have incentive of talking about them because they're famous, because they're far from them, because they're a famous being, but at the same time, nobody from them. I think inherently in these specific cases, we don't actually know them. I think lack of information in these specific cases is the most important problem in these cases because you don't simply know them. If I want to talk about the people who are living in Seoul or who are living in rich areas because I'm so poor, I think I have lack of information to even start to talk about those people. So most of the people in these specific defamation cases, you don't simply know them. Even if you talk about them, that might be a criticism, that might be accused of a defamation. I think it's going to be easily made when you actually have criminal courses, criminal court having these defamation cases. That's why we think, I think it is seriously important to know that it is so hard to prove that it is malintended or not. I think this is specifically important because intention matters in the criminal court. When you know the intention and when you know there is no intention, it specifically changes the accusation. It specifically changes the even sentences. For example, like negligent homicides. For example, it even decreases the amount of sentences that actually give to these accused convicts. I think specific cases of we can't actually prove this intention or intent to damage, intent to harm in the first place because we don't have any information. Only few people in this world could actually talk about them in the first place. It leads to the situation where you can't talk about them. I think this gives you directly a chilling effect to the society where your freedom of speech can be massively damaged in the society. When you're so scared of defame somebody, I think you should just shut up because you're scared of the immense consequences that you're going to face as an individual. I think this blocks media to work. I think this blocks vibrant media who's trying so hard to actually seek for the truth. I think in specific cases, the wrongful accusations made in the media, the other media fixes, or the other personnel fixes, these discourses happening in the society would like to stop just because of these charges. I think this is going to generate a great harm to the society where all these individuals in this room should shut up because you don't simply have not enough information about that individual being. I think we have freedom to talk about them without that, and then we also have right to know more about them. So the second argument I need to prove to you is the intent to touch. I told you we need to prove either of two, right, to constitute the cases. But normally in the criminal courts, they have heavily put weight upon criminal intent to touch because it is quite easy to prove. I'm going to prove to you why it's so hard to prove. Let's first analyze the concept of fame. Okay, let me ask you a question. Do you have actually a fame? I think it is a really ideologically vague idea to begin with from the get-go because it is intangible. We don't see fame. I don't see any fame from Andy Hume just because he's a great debater and the best debater in this room. I don't see any fame from Sungryul Park just because he was winning the East Asia not winning, second place. I don't know if he has fame or not, I don't see if I can actually criticize him because I have the same amount of fame, because I don't have any fame, because I have greater fame. I don't simply know. It is a really vague concept, impossible to gauge because it depends on the ego of the individuals. It can't be generally applicable to the individuals when you talk about your own ego. Sometimes you hide your ego, sometimes you explicitly express your ego, sometimes you want to bulk up and actually express more than your ego because you think you're going to hurt, right? The next concept that I'm going to talk about is the crucial concept of the criminal justice, which is general applicability. The reason why we can't apply the subjective justice upon every individuals in the society is because simply we don't know. Like, for example, I want to kill the rapist, I want to kill the people who actually steal people, but then there is a general applicable standard that we actually punish them because majority of the people in the society would like to agree. Before that, okay.
Okay, if there is someone who loves my girlfriend, he lies, I cheat on other people because he won't broke up me with my girlfriend, then don't you think there is a clear harm?
And I am your friend, I'm going to go to your girlfriend and then say that you actually didn't cheat. I think it promotes the discussion, I think it promotes the truth. I think there needs to be a procedure of seeking truth when you are actively getting harmed. Then you don't know you're harmed or not because your ego is so big, right? Are you harmed? Are you not harmed? Depends on the situations, right? That's why we're talking about this specific concept of general applicability because there needs to be a proper and objective standard. So what's the harm when we don't actually have general applicability? First of all, equality. I think criminal justice should suffice everybody in the society, or at least majority of the people in the society, because they would not accept simply their own criminal charges, and they would simply not trust the criminal justice when they are facing any situations of threatening their own securities, right? I think it is specifically important when we talk about the general applicability. That's why we think they're going to be scared and they're going to be untrusted when they're fear of getting wrongfully convicted, when the serious consequences are awaiting when you're wrongfully convicted. That's why ex-convicts are not getting jobs. They're significantly getting affected. I proved you two things. It's really hard, impossible to prove intent to harm. It is really impossible to talk about even intent to touch when it's most of the cases constitutes the crime in the status quo. That's why we're very proud to propose.
Mr. Speaker, today we're here to deal with crime. Why we accuse crime and why defamation is part of that category and why it should not be written. We have a very clear stance. Defamation is something necessary to impose the social values that we pursue. Why so? Let's look at the nature of crime. The reason how we categorize crimes, or the background behind how we categorize crimes, is first of all, we want to stop wrong conduct from taking place. We want to prevent such actions leading to becoming precedents, or at the same time, we want to prevent other harms to be made to other social members. Based on this, the current status quo is that there's so much development of technology, there's so much SNS, there's so much blogs and whatnot, and there's so much various medias and other outlets for people to express their opinions. However, we believe that based on this, there is an abuse the government seems to seem that there is an abuse of freedom of expression, and that is what's leading to people defaming others, and that's why, because it could be abused, we should simply rid it. However, what we think is defamation itself is no different from any other crime, and at the same time, we believe that their solution, ridding defamation, is a wrong problem-solution mismatch. I'd like to explain to you about this in my rebuttals. First of all, they've made a claim that fame is a very vague value. It's unseen, it cannot be seen, and at the same time, there's subjective justice in our society that can lead to defamation being abused. However, first of all, yes, fame may not be seen. Yes, the intentions may be questionable, but we would like to argue, Mr. Speaker, that intention is not the sole factor for you to judge whether an action is a crime or not. There are more other factors that are considered. There is intention, there is the method that is actually used in committing that crime, and also the harms and potential results of that crime as well. In actual criminal cases, Mr. Speaker, we consider the intention of a crime committer, but at the same time we consider what method they used and what harms they imposed. And at the same time, because there is a difference between case by case, we differ on what kind of verdict they give, and we differ on what we emphasize more, whether it's the method they used, whether it's the intention they had in the first place. So we believe that, first of all, even if fame may seem intangible and it may seem so wrong to convict, we believe that it's measured not just by fame and intentions of an individual, but its method and harm that's also being considered. So we believe there are other standards that should counterbalance it. But at the same time, if this seems to be not enough, we believe that getting rid of defamation is not the true solution. We think if that's the problem, make better standards. Add some other criteria or standards to what you accuse of defamation. Talk about what is wrong, but giving a wrong solution by simply ridding it. We believe that that's what's truly wrong and what's truly an irresponsible government. At the same time, we believe that... Yes, go on.
The problem is this: my fame as of now cannot be calculated. When someone defames me now, that aftermath cannot be calculated. We need our law and its basis on objective standards.
Alright, first of all, they talked about how it cannot be calculated. However, when we go to criminal courts, such as rapes or whatnot, we don't actually calculate what the actual harm is. We look at the emotional stance of the victim and what's actually happening and how they feel. We think that it's the same for defamation. If that's the problem of the subjective justice, why is it simply limited to defamation? Why not get rid of every single policy that attacks any emotional factors in their policies? We believe that it's not a simple standard that should be applied to defamation, and if that's their problem, fix the whole law. That is our stance. So now I'd like to move on to explaining to you about the spirit of the motion, why defamation is accusable based on my rebuttals, and at the same time I'd like to explain to you why defamation is dealt with in the criminal court, and at the same time why it has a significance in today's society. First of all, we believe that the spirit of the motion is today, as I explained, there's so much potential for abuse of individual rights and freedom of expression, and we want to stop that abuse. However, Mr. Speaker, we believe that simply ridding the media or ridding any other ways for you to accuse people of using it wrong is wrong. If they care so much about freedom of expression, we believe that ridding defamation itself would be another wrong point as well. At the same time, we believe, sir, that defamation is accusable. As I mentioned in my rebuttal, we have three factors mainly when we consider a crime as a crime: the intention, the method, and the harm. Intention, meaning what mind you had, what intention you wanted to achieve, and what heart you had. Method, what kind of ways or methods or tools you used in committing that crime. And lastly, what harm there is made. The harm can be divided into to the society and to the individual. Maybe yes, to the individual it may seem so vague because it concerns emotional state, but at the same time, if that seems so subjective, why is it simply limited to defamation? Why isn't it applied to other laws as well? At the same time, we also believe that the law exists and the criminal punishment exists, not simply to punish that crime, but also to prevent that from becoming a precedent and leading to other wrongful cases as well. We believe that if you rid defamation and don't give any alternatives or solutions, then it's simply going to leave a slippery slope, and you're just going to let everything happen, but at the same time, there's not going to be much of a solution. Second of all, we believe that there is a reason why defamation is dealt in criminal courts. As the opening government explained, there is a difference between civil court and criminal court. Civil court is where the individual's actions to an individual, the harm to one person, is emphasized, whereas criminal court is where the much bigger impact, the harm to society, is a much bigger factor. We believe that the reason why we accuse defamation and we have this policy is because defaming an individual may lead to a threat to society, and that's what the government wants to stop from. First of all, as I explained to you in my previous substantive, in my first claim, it can create wrong precedents, and we believe that in law, this case of wrong precedents has a big impact because, first of all, law is based on a lot in making verdicts of the past precedents. And at the same time, when you have one case, it's not just one case you get a verdict and it's closed. It leads to other policies, it leads to other laws, and that we believe that can lead to slippery slope and other potential for making this have more problems by ridding defamation. At the same time, we do believe that for a responsible government to take place, it's not just simply ridding defamation what they should do. Rather, let's look at the core problem. If the abuse is the problem, make stricter standards. Why can't we look for stricter standards to complement this program or situation or policy instead of just ridding it? Because we believe if you rid it, what is the alternative? What would you like to suggest in dealing with these issues? We do not see any answer coming from the government. For these reasons, and also because of the spirit of the motion that there is potential for harm, second of all, because the defamation itself is accusable based on how we accuse crimes, and third of all, why there is a reason why defamation is dealt with in criminal court, we do believe that there is a value in having defamation existent in our society, and we wouldn't like to have much more harm done by ridding this policy. So we believe that ridding this policy has more harms than simply adding more standards to supplement it. So therefore, we're very proud to oppose.
JD today exceptionally looks nice on his white shirt. Yes, I have lied. problem is, it is morally dubious action. It is perhaps even morally abhorrent action. The question that we have in mind is, it's a subjective idea, whether JD has lost his fame this moment. It's a subjective idea whether my lies inflicted his pain. It's a subjective idea at the end, whatever the consequences has occurred through my speech, there has been tangible and calculatable objective standards that we can apply in criminal court. That's why we are proud to stand by in today's opening government. We tell you that emotional distress is a wrong thing, but it is subjective. Emotions are different from an individual to individual. We cannot calculate that. That's why JD has been consistent in telling you already that when it comes to the most important decisions, and that means by criminalizing an individual and ruining that person's life, by declaring him as someone who has not done the basic civic duties of our society, we need objective standards, and we need proper standards. And we don't like the ideas coming from the opening opposition saying that. We can perhaps better the standards when the standards itself, we have told you, is inherently to be rigged. No, thank you. Let's move on to rebuttals one by one. First, intangibility. What we've not heard responses from them. We told you there's two impossibilities in this particular calculation. On the first level, it's impossible to calculate whether you possess fame in the first place. Fame is an intangible concept that can differ from an individual to individual. I believe that tableau is famous, but some of you have never heard tableau. Or it might be the case again, we are different with different individuals of the external perceptions towards those individuals. In that case, it's initially impossible to calculate whether we possess fame in the start. No, thank you. The problem is, the aftermath of a particular speech is also very dubious in this case, because we are impossible to identify, if we were to be impossible to identify their fame in the first place, it's obviously impossible to identify whatever the consequences have been occurred towards one speech. If that is true, we have been telling you, if these are incalculable from the start, it's a wrong idea to criminally inflict a human being. No, thank you. Not to mention that the stupidity of this motion and stupidity of the defamation is that if you're a homeless person and the society doesn't consider your fame, if you're a person who are already abhorrent by the society and therefore you're perhaps externally perceived as a wrong person, despite the dignities that you contain, you are automatically exempted from defamation laws because that's what the opposition should believe in. We think that these wrongful standards from the start tells us and imperatively again motivates us to get rid of defamation. No, thank you. Second level, causality. Another problem when they mention SNS in blog is, again, to what extent can we actually trail the causality of events? In other words, we don't think it should be speculations when we criminalize an individual. We do not know whether my SNS activities have done defamation towards an individual and whatever losses that individual suffers are from my SNS activities. We cannot ever find the trail of thoughts or trail of events to the extent that we can be sure that I am the major one who must be criminalized. If that is true, another problem is we can potentially again harm individuals who had no intentions. We can even harm individuals only through speculation. We think it's an irresponsible government to criminalize an individual only with speculations when we cannot prove the activities in the between. No, thank you. But furthermore, intentions. Because we tell you that the wrong precedents that the opening opposition tries to press in today's debate comes from their side of the house. The more and more legal precedents are accumulated on their side of the house by saying that this constitutes of malintention, by saying that this constitutes of causality, it becomes a shackling down effect. We believe that any single moment and an accumulated moment that defamation laws exist in our society automatically leads to more shackling down effect of individuals. And the problem is this. A, we have already told you that individuals do not possess often the necessary information to talk about the subject, i.e. politics. We think that it's a horrible idea, that if you cannot be entirely sure with the political things that you say, you should be better shut down. We also think that the freedom of expression is an inherent right that individuals possess, and therefore, wrong precedents come from them. The good precedent is that we further pursue this with a good idea. Finally, emotions. So, emotions are subjective. When JD told you guys that I want East Asian IV, I was very sad. I was obviously, again, very morally and at the same time emotionally under duress. That does not mean, again, I can press charges against him. And this is inherent subjectivity that individuals possess. A lie, a speech, an action has different, again, emotional receptions. That's why it's different from physical harms. We are happy to continue with any physical harm that has been inflicted upon an individual. We are not going for simple emotional duress. Let's take you before the substantive.
So what is your stance about denial of Holocaust and any other hate speech and racism?
Great, let's move on to that. First, we'll tell you responsibility and power, and we will tell you the natural checks and balances. Why? On a first level, again, as I said, it's fun that only famous people can be defamed, and therefore this is something that they possess, we don't possess, as human beings. No, thank you. But on a second level, the important thing is this. We think that once you have opted in as a public figure, that means you're okay to be scrutinized as an individual. We think that that means because you are using the media, you're using your position to make more money or to make more individual successes. We think that that moment, by contract or by the social agreement, we think it's fine that these individuals go through more scrutiny. But NC asks us, what about these wrongful statements? One, we think that the habit of resorting to law as the only solution in our society and only conflict resolution is a wrong idea. We tell you that our ideologies are not that stupid. In other words, we tell you that the Holocaust denial, we can win that with our ideological battles. We can find out our political truth with more fruitful deliberation. But the key thing is this. In order to facilitate such political deliberations, in order to facilitate better academic discourses, the only way to pursue so is by, again, having a vibrant deliberation and vibrant discourse in the first place. That's why we are telling you on the side of opening government that the only way that we can have more discourses and have proper social agreements and make this more and more morally reprehensible, and perhaps at the end the society makes the decisions to argue which ideas are permissible and which ideas are impermissible. We are telling you that law itself cannot make the decision for us. Law should be the basic minimum, and law should not be an injury towards individuals with its subjective standards, and we want objective standards in this case. Particularly because we believe that these are related with issues like politics. Particularly because we believe that these issues are necessarily related with the most important decisions that we make throughout our lives, and those things require proper level of, and more level of, and proliferate level of discourses. What we fight on open government? We love discourses. We love freedom of expression. We want law to be a bare minimum, but when it is the bare minimum, it should be objective. We must believe that when we were to be prosecuted, when we were to be convicted, we need to know that my standard and their standard and everyone's standard should be the same. That's the foundation of our belief in the civic law. That's the foundation of our belief in the Republican ideals. And that's why we're very proud to propose.
Mr. Speaker, my father is a psychologist, which means that people with mental distresses come to him. Does that mean that he's not a doctor? No, Mr. Speaker, he is a doctor. And the whole of the international community agrees that mental distress is also a disease. The patients that come to him may not have bruises or scars that may come from rape or actual cases of crime that they seem to support. Mr. Speaker, but however, we do recognize that what you feel inside is also something that can harm you, Mr. Speaker, and that can be a source of lawsuit. What I'm going to do in today's debate is first bring to you some rebuttals and then move on to my substances, as a good second speaker should do, and talk about the society where this motion is passed. Let's first talk about the rebuttals. Because what we've seen throughout, Mr. Speaker, is this massive launch and discredibility against our own court system that we already have now. The claims we heard were these, that if intention is not proven, nothing should be considered a crime. If intention is hard to prove, it shouldn't be considered a crime. If that's the case, Mr. Speaker, and Seyoung killed a person, then when Seyoung ran into a person, he didn't mean to kill a person, then we shouldn't let that intention be a court case, right? If that's the case, Mr. Speaker, if self-defense comes into act, whether you did it for self-defense, which is an intention, whether you did it to kill, action, which is an intention, shouldn't be considered in court, Mr. Speaker, right? That's not what we do in the status quo. Because, Mr. Speaker, whereas the actions are also important, we do question into the intent of that actions. And intent is already done and proven in courts by testimonies, by evidences, by people who record the sayings of this. A lying intention can be proven, Mr. Speaker. It's what the court has been doing and is what we are going to continue to do. So if their only problem is that fact, Mr. Speaker, their whole case wouldn't stand at all. And also this point of how I love JD is suddenly going to act, I love JD shouldn't be a sort of defamation. It isn't, Mr. Speaker, because the fundamental is like because the fundamental thing to question in a defamation case is whether that defamation statement is true or false or not. When as you have, I'm probably sure you watched Bosun, but the biggest contention was whether killer actually peed. Right? So the thing is, Mr. Speaker, it's the truth that is questioned. Your statement, I love JD, isn't necessarily something that is considered to be a source of defamation, which I think is important to establish this fact. Also, these ideas like fame is not measurable. Mr. Speaker, fame is measurable to the extent that it harms people, that malign intent can be proven, and also even if, the thing is, Mr. Speaker, we have to question the fact, what if consequences can be proven? What if casualty of events can be proven at the end of the day? And that's what's being done, Mr. Speaker, in court cases. If they want to not say the court case is something they believe in, then go out of Korea. Also, this, I'm sorry. Also, this fact of how it's shackling down individuals and it's making vibrant discourse go out of place. The problem we have with this argument is that launching of a court case is a tiresome act. The launching of a court case, considering something as a crime, is also something that a person would actually take into court if they decided for themselves, or if they decided, or prosecutors decided, that this was actually a method that they wanted to discuss. That's why exactly if I say bad things about Inambak doesn't come to me and sue me. We think the point of vibrant discourse already do happen in the status quo because petty, minor things are not really being questioned in the status quo. We think it's important for you to establish this fact too. Last point, rebuttal. Public figures, how they opted into this, they deserved it. Mr. Speaker, obvious violation of the equality of vocation. We think we have a problem with this. Really less rebuttal. They talk about law and how law should be not a source of settling down arguments. The thing is, Mr. Speaker, what's important to realize is that law should at least be a bare minimum. They're getting rid of this. We have a problem with this. Now, quickly on to my substantive. And I'm going to paint for you a society where defamation is no longer a crime. And you should consider whether that society is better than the society we are living in right now. The first thing that we think is going to happen is that it's going to incentivize people to intrude more into other people's lives. Because all they're going to have, and they said they didn't like this, so maybe they wouldn't have this either. All they're going to have is settlement, monetary-wise resolution of conflicts. What that is going to do, Mr. Speaker, is that for those who don't really care about money, or for those who think that that risk of attacking that individual with malign intention is something that they would want to do if they could only just pay fines for it, Mr. Speaker, we think that people are going to resort to that. What this policy does is that says that saying something bad about a person can be granted to those with money who feel that money is not an important matter to them. We think that this is problematic. We think it's going to incentivize those people to commit to those acts. But second point, and the more important point, is that we think that abuses will and can occur. The problem with this is that right now, because defamation is a criminal court case, the people who are destined with people who are attacked by those malign intention words, what they could do was they could use this criminal case as a leverage for discussing settlements. Therefore, what happened was that they could get a more valuable, more guaranteed, more deserved amount of payment before it ever happened in the first place. So what this does, Mr. Speaker, what their policy is going to do is they're going to get rid of that bargaining chip. They're no longer going to get the amount of money that they deserve for someone saying bad things about them. But before 6 years.
Or is it a good idea that lawyers and those people can buy very lucrative lawyers can easily shut people up by threatening them with defamation? Is that a good world?
So the thing is, Mr. Speaker, but the point to realize here is that that is a direct attack against our whole justice system. The point is, Mr. Speaker, we want good lawyers to come in, we want good prosecutors to come in, and we want them to debate the situation, which is already happening in the status quo. Simple answer. Also to this idea that criticism is going to get more exacerbated because we think that criminal deterrence is probably a good deterrence against you committing a criminal act, right? We think that deterrence is going to not create vibrant resolutions, but in fact a world where you say bad things about people everywhere. Thirdly, this idea that mental harm is going to be caused. Because mental harm isn't something that can be compensated for, Mr. Speaker. That's why we had defamation as criminal law in the first place. Because, Mr. Speaker, victims of this defamation laws have the ability and right to guard themselves against this and see that their offender goes to jail rather than pay them some sorts of money. We have established laws to protect them. Mr. Speaker, as political figures have a right, as we do have a right to know, we think we have also, political figures also should be guaranteed a defense against people who inquire into their lives about their right to know, as I'm pretty sure you have debated before in this tournament. Mr. Speaker, we're very, very proud of
today the opening government came up to the podium and talked about the issues of principle of criminal justice, Mr. Speaker. They talked about how, one, it is very difficult in the case of defamation to prove the intention to harm and also to intent to touch, Mr. Speaker, which is why it lacks general applicability to make it criminal justice, Mr. Speaker. And furthermore, they talked about how it prevents freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and how getting rid of defamation laws would, in fact, foster more discussions and political discourse. Furthermore, today, the opposition, leader of opposition and the opposition, opening opposition, came up to the podium and talked about the issue of irresponsibility of the people and irresponsibility of the government, Mr. Speaker. They talked about how there's room for abuse, and they also talked about how it creates a slippery slope of precedents, Mr. Speaker. The most important difference in the opening government and the opening opposition is that the opening government essentially had principles and also harms regarding the issue of defamation, ladies and gentlemen. Because when we make defamation a criminal crime, what happens is we see less freedom of speech. We see issues regarding freedom of expression, Mr. Speaker. But today on the opening opposition, they talked about the irresponsibility of the people and the governments. But once and for all, they never tell us how and why defamation in fact leads to harms and what kind of harms that are related with defamations and how defamation in fact leads to harms, Mr. Speaker. And this is something that we have yet to hear from the opposition bench. No, thank you, sir. I heard the example of your girlfriend and whatnot, Mr. Now, Mr. Speaker, what I'm going to do as the member of the government side today is I'm going to talk a little bit more upon these principles, Mr. Speaker, on additional levels of principle and why this should not be made into an issue of crime in the criminal court. And also, before I do that, I'm going to talk about the issues brought up by the opening opposition and talk about the issues later. Talk about the issues that pertains to today's debate, Mr. Speaker. Now, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, as the closing government side, I believe that there are also additional principles upon which we cannot make this a crime. For example, one, we believe that it's extremely difficult also to identify the perpetrator. This was something that Sungryul said is rebuttable. We're going to develop this further to talk about how it is practically impossible to identify and find the criminal and the perpetrator in the case of defamation, in which under criminal law, identifying is an important process. No, thank you, sir. And secondly, I'm also going to talk about it's impossible to prove the causality of harm. This is where the issue analysis on the harms come up. I'm going to talk about how defamation, in fact, really is impossible to prove that they actually are the acts that lead to these harms, Mr. Speaker. And secondly, I'm going to talk about the issues on the principle of justice, and under the principle of justice, how this cannot stand as a crime in today's society, Mr. Speaker. Yes, sir.
I think there's many contradictions in your opening government, right? Opening government said we cannot verify the harms. That is why we can punish them. But they said we can punish them in the civil court, right? So if there is no evidence, we can punish them, right?
To quote unquote, Jeong said it would be unwise to take this to a civil court. So unwise MC, please listen to our opening government. Okay, with this cleared up, what I'm going to do is we're going to directly move on into the issue of hard to prove and identify the perpetrator. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in the case of defamation, direct harm is impossible to prove. For instance, let's say, in the case of crimes in the criminal court, direct harm must be able to be proven, Mr. Speaker. If I stab NC in the heart, and his heart stops due to my knife, there's a direct harm of my actions leading to NC's demise. But ladies and gentlemen, let's take NC's example for this case. Let's say that Abi shows me a picture of NC hugging another girl. So I tell my friends that NC is cheating on his girlfriend. And then Moonyeol and Sungryul and Jeong tells it to their friends. And eventually, Moonyeol tells NC's girlfriend. And NC's girlfriend dumps NC. Then NC receives emotional pain. Then who is the perpetrator? Am I the perpetrator? Or is Abi the perpetrator? Are they the perpetrator? Or is Moonyeol the perpetrator? Or maybe his girlfriend is the perpetrator. Essentially, under the opposition logic, what they're going to do is because when there are potential harms and abuse and whatnot, they're going to criminalize everyone. So everyone is going to be criminalized. And your girlfriend is going to go to jail because she dumped you. In criminal justice, when we're labeling innocent citizens, or when we're labeling our citizens to be criminals for the rest of their lives, we need applicable standards, and we need to be able to identify who was the cause and who was in fact the criminal in a court, ladies and gentlemen. And secondly, I'm going to talk about how hard it is to, in fact, prove the causality, Mr. Speaker. This is quite similar, but in a different aspect, Mr. Speaker, because, for instance, I'm going to talk about economic harms and quite concrete harms that also exist in the case of defamation, Mr. Speaker. Corporations' stocks drop not only due to their reputation, but also due to their performance, age of CEOs, and recent actions and whatnot. Mental harms also exist due to multiple reasons, such as, hearing people say things about me and my girlfriend, having my family know these kind of things being said about me and my family, and having my girlfriend dump me for that case, Mr. Speaker. So essentially, even if emotional harms do exist, as they say, and do exist in a concrete form, it is impossible to distinguish the causality of the act of defamation itself to the actual harms and actual emotional pains that these people go through with, Mr. Speaker. So under that logic, what they're going to do is they're going to criminalize tweeters who retweet anything. They're going to criminalize people who press like on Facebook and spread to 500 other more timelines, Mr. Speaker. And under this law, and under the current law of defamation in a criminal court, nobody is free from becoming a criminal, Mr. Speaker. Which is why this cannot become a criminal crime, Mr. Speaker, and which is why the United Nations Covenant on Civil Rights, Article 19, specifically prohibit countries from labeling defamation as a crime, Mr. Speaker. And this leads directly onto the principle of justice, because defamation, because fame, because emotional harms are all significantly proportional simply to the situation and the people involved. There we have no distributive justice because it differs with people and people. We also do not have proportional justice because same acts can lead to different consequences, Mr. Speaker, depending on what the defendant claims. Which is why, even on the basis on the principle of justice, this cannot stand as a viable crime in our legal system. Which is why I urge you, Mr. Hume, to sign a negative ballot in today's debate. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, it's funny to hear the argumentation coming from closing government. You cannot get every criminal. That is why you cannot, don't start this, criminal activity from the start. I don't think that's the right approach closing government take, right? Maybe we cannot, some portion of the people, then we are not going to punish them because we don't have ability, right? There was also some people, we can provide why these people is perpetrators, right? I called in this place and I talk shit about Seyoung and everybody hating that I am the perpetrators, right? The biggest examples of them is Twitter. I retweet certain stupid ideas about tableau. Therefore, I might not be a perpetrator. I know you are the perpetrator because you spread the messages, right? And you are the perpetrator. I don't think it is that hard. If that is hard, then we should get rid of all the policemen and prosecutors and we need to get the new one because they have an inability to do anything. More than that, if that is the problem, then let court decide, right? Rather than just from the start, no for the defamation law, because even if we can verify everything, we cannot punish anyone. We think this is the problematic. With that, I have two questions in today's debate. First question, because opening and closing member only talked about we cannot verify the harm, I'm going to prove to you why we can verify the harm. Second question is going to be about, this debate is not about we should protect the politicians and powerful entities. This debate is also about what about small and unpowerful entity who cannot defend themselves, right? Then why our policy can defend these people. But before moving on to my first argument, I'm going to give you, for the first time in my lifetime in debate, 3 contradictions coming from opening. Firstly, Jeong clearly said we are not going to do this in civil court. If there is evidence, don't do that civil court too, right? It sounds like civil courts, no evidence, we can punish some people. I think this is the first contradiction. Second contradiction, thankfully, the second speaker gave us POI in contradiction. He said we should buy the lawyer and someone who has money and he can buy the lawyer and then we can shut up some certain people, right? No, this is the criminal court. We just call the prosecutors. I don't need to buy the lawyer because prosecutors is going to punish those people, right? Last contradiction. They said we love the freedom of speech, but they said civil court is okay. But if you go to civil court, you should pay a lot of money. Like people like me and like Andy and other people who love to drink in the craft work, we are afraid of speech is something, right? That is why your policy harms the freedom of speech too. Then move on to my first question. Why there is harm? Everybody has to know, I think this is shame, I have to give the parameters of defamation law. There are three conditions. A, speech has to be lie. Except Korea and Zimbabwe, if you don't lie, and then you are not going to punish as a defamation law. Second, speakers should have a malicious intent, right? If there's a greater good of the society, then we don't punish them. No, this is true. Thirdly, more than that, there must be a physical harm and physical damages verified by the prosecutors and people who call the police, right? Other than that, this is true. Other than that, we never punish the defamation law. Then I'm going to prove to you why it is nice and it is okay to verify the intentions, right? Girlfriend, boyfriend thing, and they understand and this is good things, right? What about this? If I have a restaurant and Andy has a restaurant bigger than me, but he hates me, that is why he lied to those citizens. There is a cockroach in their soup. Then we know there is an intentions, right? We do this every day in the civil court and killer. If I kill someone, and if I have a little bit of debt to them, and even if I claim this is the accident, but prosecutor said, no, there is the motive, because you have the debt, right? We always verify the intention based on the evidence, based on relationship, based on the everything. That is why we can pretty much easy to verify the intentions, right? Second, I think this is the funniest part. Fame. We do not know fame is there or not. I don't think fame is about greater debaters, right? Fame is about, if someone called me, you are lower than a human being. And I think everybody knows there is a, your fame is decreased by calling them lower than the human being, right? But more than that, Mr. Speaker, they said it is a very subjective. Yes. That is why we don't punish everybody when they say something bad. That is why I have to go to police stations and I have to say my fame was decreased by them. This is the status quo. More than them, Mr. Speaker. They said psychological damage can be taken, right? This is the problem. Nobody knows how much my psychology damaged by them, right? Nobody knows. I see the stupid pictures. Oh, and I almost dead. And can I punish? And there might be differences of psychological damages, right? But we try to verify the damages even if it is hard. Why? Because state has to do this because that is the damages, right? The last things, right? Yes.
In criminal justice system, intention means intention to directly cause the consequence. In other words, that's why the distinction between murder and manslaughter and negligent homicide. Prove that to us that when I write an SNS,
yes, I said before, even if you lie, if there is a relationship and evidence, we always verify the intentions, right? And we call you as the killers. Last one, I think this is a really, really important thing, right? They said there is no physical damages, but I have 4 different examples. They said Pablo's damages, fame cannot be verified. No, we can punish someone called Pablo as liar because this famous person, he always depends on their fame to sell their product and their singer-song sing and their rap, right? That is why if everybody called them as liar, he lose a lot of pain, lose a lot of pain, and as a singer, that is why this physical damages as a financial damages. Second, restaurant. Third, girlfriend, boyfriend thing, right? Last, politician. Politician always based on their fame. So if somebody called me a liar and I show my, wife and that is not true, and then I lose a lot of votes. That is why we can verify there is a physical damages. Other than that, current status quo, we don't punish these people if there is no physical damages. That is why you are losing the debate from the start. So last question, why this debate is also about protecting the weaker persons, right? Like I said, this debate is not about protecting the politicians and powerful person. This debate must be about weaker entity, right? If powerful person say bad thing about me, they make paper, they make 전단지, they pay a lot of money and using the internet. He is liar, he is bad MF, and then I can't do anything about that, right? Because I don't have money, I don't have manpower, I can't fight against those people, right? That is why state has to protect these stupid and sad, accidents and incidents, right? Without the state, these small and young and poor entities cannot protect themselves. That is why our society is better than your society. Mr. Speaker, if you know the parameters of the defamation law, they cannot win this debate from the start. Because if there is no actual physical damages verified by the individuals, you cannot sue them as a defamation. Though, I'm very proud to post this motion.
Speaker. So before moving on to my clashes, which incorporates the rebuttals to entire opposition bench, I'd like to clarify first. They misunderstand the concept coming from the government of civil court and criminal court. However, what we support here is that defamation should not be the case of crime punishment of should not be regarded as a crime that should be punished under both criminal court and civil court. So they should not make petty arguments or petty rebuttals with that. So moving on to my two clashes found in this debate. First clash would be, where is the standard of justice when it comes to defamation, which lies on very subjective categorization. Second clash would be, can we actually punish the perpetrators, or can we even find the criminals? Moving on to my clashes. Where is the standard of justice? And C came up and talked about, because harm can be proved, because all the determinations and all the decisions will be eventually coming from the judge. We say that if the judge, an individual, is so important, where is the law and where is the base of those proportionality of punishment when it comes to crime assessment? When they rely heavily on individual discretion when it comes to this case of subjective cases. Even more, even though if they find they want to seek the truth with individual testimonies, individual proofs, again, where is the law? Where is the rule of law? That is the most fundamental basic when it comes to justice. We believe that law should be the most objective standard when it comes to punishment, when it comes to defining who is criminal or not. We say that those individual discretions should not be incorporated. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, we say that because emotional pain is up to individuals, when it comes to emotional pain, even if we can quantify the defamation coming from a lot of perpetrators, upon individuals, the emotional pain that they individually get is different. Therefore, proportionality of punishment can never be justified, can never be applied when it comes to this case. Because it's hard to make justice when it comes to proportionality, because emotional pain and psychological pain they support so much cannot be even quantified in the first place, and it's so different from individuals. We say that's unfair to actually make defamation as one of the crimes that is eligible to punish. Moving on to my second argument, can we actually punish the perpetrators? This is, our member came up and clarified the simple impracticality and impossibility to actually enforce this motion. When it comes to defamation, when you see the procedure of defaming others, it's not that there is root cause, and it's not that the first one to say about the defaming statement actually has malintent or good intent, right? In the first place, Mr. Speaker, intent cannot be transparent, and intent can never be proved under any circumstances. And second, Mr. Speaker, when those mere words and statements are they go around media, all the SNS portals and whatnot, and even person-to-person individuals, even though that statement is malintended or good-intended, that statement is eligible to be distorted, and it is eligible to actually have other intentions that can actually defame others, and that can actually have emotional pain on others. Because the perpetrators, or the root cause, or the intent can never be verified under any circumstances when it comes to defamation, we say that first it's impossible to find the one who started the defamation. They can never prove that that person actually has a malintent. So who is the criminal? As we said, that's why I provided the UN Constitution. When it comes to Clause 9, you can never label defamation as a crime case, because now you're labeling every citizen to be eligible for the crime when it comes to defamation. For example, if I one post that criticized Jeong Park because he performed so badly in World Cup, I can be sued, and I can be eligible to be sued by relatives or Jeong Park, but the intent that I liked it does not mean that I actually had more intent to actually criticize him directly, and that does not prove that I have malintent to actually give emotional harm, inflict psychological harm to that individual. Because those activities of agreeing to such opinion or statements or actually moving those words around never can be verified, and there are so many people who are sharing the same words in different senses. We say that the intention can never be verified.
Okay, I think physical damage is very subjective. If someone hit me and someone hit them, if I'm stronger than him, the damage is going to be different, right? I think it's very subjective. And I am not going to punish the physical damages too.
Physical damages, you can see physical damage. When it comes to psychological damage, it can never be quantified. If you get the physical damages, like if you go to the hospital, doctors will tell you now you have to stay in hospital for 2 weeks or 4 weeks. That means that we can quantify the physical damage. But psychological damage, the fact that people have mental problems can never stop going to psychiatrists because the reason of that is because that they can never quantify the severity of the pain that their psychology or damage in the first place. That's just why they keep making rebuttals and arguments about the quantifying emotional pain. Emotional pain is the same as physical pain. We say that yes, there will be emotional pain, but because individuals feel different degree of emotional pain, we can never inflict upon single criteria when it comes to defamation. Rule of law doesn't exist because proportionality of law never exists in that case. That's why we're very proud to be folks.
Thank you for that speech. Now we call the final speaker.
Mr. Chair, the stance coming from closing opposition is that we think that the current laws when it comes to defamation deters harms and protect the weak. Now, before anything else, we need to make some concessions on today's debate, right? Because I think it's very important for us to concede that not all defamation cases can be processed in the present situation. But we think that there are still traditional cases that they can process. I need to make this delineation right now because even in the current situation, laws when it comes to digital media is not yet even passed in most of the countries, right? But does the laws of defamation still, have, merits when it comes to other traditional cases, like the case of NC when he has his restaurant case, which we felt that there was no response coming from the government side, right? Now, two questions that I want to ask in order for us to clarify this debate. First is that I want to ask you, how do we basically process criminal actions or criminal, cases? Second, this basic question when it comes to why do we punish, and I want to highlight NC's case. But before anything else, very excited.
Me one A action, B damage. You have to prove to me why that A action directly caused the B damage. Why MD talking about cockroach make NC's business bankrupt?
I'm going to explain that on my clashes. If you can wait, I'm going to do that, okay? So first clash, right? We need to prove that there's a direct harm, right? And because that's basically the main contention and the problem of opening government. But before that, I want to tackle the entire government side, right? Because I think it's very important for us for everyone that I need to walk you through. How do you basically process criminal activities? Because the main complaint coming from the government side is that one, you cannot really identify the perpetrator. No, that's not true. Maybe when it comes to digital media, but then again, like what I mentioned, in some countries, maybe most of the countries, we have a problem like that, right? But we have cases that we can identify the perpetrator, right? And that's basically the thing that NC already discussed to you. Like for example, if you've seen the detergent, advertisement on TV, they would usually blur the competitor, right? Now, given that we dismiss this defamation law, if I am tied, right, I have this, detergent A versus the competitor, and then I would say, oh, they're putting, not so important things, bad things on their things.
Of course, you can actually identify those things. Even NC's restaurant case can be identified. The point that I'm saying is there are traditional cases and traditional action of defamation that you can identify, right? Now let's go on to the second, to the initial complaints coming from the government side. This entire, case coming from opening government. I think NC was clear when it comes to identifying the parameters of the debate. He said that one, in order for us to process the case, it must be a lie. If it's a truth, we don't process it. Second, there must be a malicious intent, and third, there must be an actual harm. Now here comes the entire problem of the opening government. They said that because when you talk about, fame, as if it was, discussed in a very philosophical idea, that fame is too vague, that we cannot really examine the permissibility of this claim to the court. That's why you cannot really prove the trail of action. No, not really. I think NC already answered that, right? Even opening opposition already gave you their analysis when it comes to psychological stress. You can even, file cases in Australia when it comes to people, giving you stress at work, right? So basically, we count that as a harm. I heard that from a friend in Australia. But more importantly, when you talk about losing opposition, right? I think NC was clear when he come up with this restaurant case, right? I think it was very clear that one, it could actually end careers. It could destroy businesses, and it even disrupt your market relationship with your customers, right? Because basically the main problem of the opening government here is that they were under the impression that when you talk about defamation, you're only talking about famous people, like celebrity, politicians, that maybe you can say, because you've earned your credit from the public, then it's okay for us to defame you. Maybe on that level, maybe you're true, but that's not really the debate, right? You've seen your influence live. You've been talking about even businesses and other entities that you can defame. Can we really, given all of those things, is it actually okay for us to dismiss this law that we have on defamation? Because the next best question that we need to ask, right, is that just because there are numerous of vague cases presented by opening government, does that warrant you to basically cancel the law when it comes to defamation? That's why my second issue would be about, why do we punish criminal actions anyway? But before anything else, yes.
When I punch JD in the face, that's a physical action with the intention to punch him in the face. The problem is, when I write bad things about his restaurant, you cannot make a causal relationship with that comment and the end of business and end of career. That's
Mr. Chair, when it comes to filing a case, you must have evidence first that must be permissible in the court of law. And I think NC already identified that. If we can prove that there was a malicious intent and we can actually have evidence that it causes me actual harms, maybe the loss of business, then there's a case, right? What's your problem with that? Second question. Now let's talk about why do we punish these kind of things. I think the goal of criminal justice system is very clear, and everyone should be, well-versed when it comes to this thing. One, we punish them, not just because we want to punish them, but like what opening opposition discussed, we want to deter other activities. I'm helping opening up. But more importantly, there is a concept of protection. Right? Now, NC here gave you a unique extension on how do we basically protect individuals in society, especially the marginalized one, the weak one, the not so strong one, right? Because we think the main problem when it comes to the discussion of defamation is that most of the time there is a power imbalance when it comes to party A versus party B. And Steve explained this to you. Maybe there are cases that the strong one would fight against the weak one. Sometimes maybe the weak one can also fight the strong one. The problem there is that we use these things as a form of dirty tactic to destroy other things, right? You've seen this, the negative advertisements, smear campaigns, and most of the time, those who have resources would always have the capability to do this at the expense of the weak one, right? Now what we're doing there is that we think that the current situation protects the weak ones, and we like the present situation because at least to some extent, right? Because we can see that maybe it's democracy, like we like what you think. What they're saying, but nonetheless, these people must be protected also in a minimal level in order for us, not for them to cause whatever, businesses that they have. At the end of the day, I think closing opposition was very clear. When you talk about defamation, we like it because one, indeed there are physical, actual, tangible harms, restaurant case. But more importantly, this is good when it comes to protecting the society, which is also part of your criminal justice system. But more importantly, it helps the poor, which is most of the time loses in the whatever competition that we have right now. With that, I'm proud to oppose.